Talk to us about your connection to his case and why his current positioning is so significant to the status of anybody who is seeking due process for any allegations that they may face, either criminal or immigration related.
Thank you so much, Lurie. And first, can I just say I'm as frustrated just listening to it, because as lawyers, we have to deal with facts
Right.
and the law. And we can't make up facts, and we can't have the law apply in the way we want it to, because that is our will. We have to work within a
Mm.
framework, quite frankly, that has been determined by the highest court in the land, the U.S. Supreme Court, which says and reiterates the fact that everyone deserves what? Due process. Imagine that. Um, so it is frustrating. But look, before he was deported from this country, Mr. Garcia was a resident here in Prince George's County, and still is a resident of Prince George's County, quite frankly, because at some point, he should really get due process. And if it is determined that he should leave the country, then certainly he'll be deported to wherever is appropriate. But for right now, he has a family here in Prince George's County. He has children. He has a wife.
Mm.
I believe two of his children are on the spectrum. So he was the primary breadwinner for the family. So that whole family is dealing with a lot of, just loss in terms of losing him as a breadwinner and as a member of the family living in the household.
Mm.
And so there's a lot of issues, I think, that the family is facing. And so that is of importance to me as their elected leader, with respect to criminal justice. And I'm not here to make any announcements about how he was a great person and that he should be in this country forever. I can't. That part, honestly, I don't know him personally, but what I
Mm.
do know is that he's a human being,
Right.
that he had certain rights afforded to him, that those rights were violated, and it is up to really this president and this administration to correct it.
Mm.
So, you know,
Yeah, and let's talk about that because I think for a lot of people they want to get really lost in the weeds of who he was as a person. I don't know this man personally. You say you don't know this man personally, and there's a lot of rumor mill driven discourse right now about who he was as an individual. But can you explain to the audience what does due process mean? Because it would seem to me that he could be the devil incarnate if he is not given access to due process. He could be accused, I should say, of being the devil incarnate, but without due process we would never really know if that accusation bears any merit. We would live in a space of not knowing. Can you explain to the audience what due process is and why it is so significant for effective and equitable access to justice?
well, let me just say what uh, the best way to describe due process is to look at what happened with our president of these United States
Huh.
during his hush money trial. You know, he was convicted on 34 counts, right? But because our justice system allows individuals to appeal a conviction, he was able to appeal his conviction. And during that time, he ran and won successfully the office of the President of the United States. So he was never then sentenced
Mm.
because the courts determined that it would not be appropriate to sentence a sitting president. So essentially, the due process guaranteed by the 14th Amendment of the US Constitution allowed Mr. Donald Trump to become the president of these United States. And really, what the due process does is it balances the powers of the government or any law, right?
Mm.
That people are protected from any actions, let's say, of government until there is a arbiter. Generally, it's the courts that will hear the case, and that's really all anyone is asking for Mr. Garcia is an opportunity to be heard on the record and for the appropriate then actions to be taken. And so, what it would require in this case is for Mr. Garcia to be brought back to have a hearing before ICE, and then a determination to be made on whether or not he should stay in the country or if he should be deported. Now, he had a prior ICE hearing, which essentially allowed him to stay in this country. And oh, by the way, that was
Mm.
under the Trump administration. Trump won. He was allowed to stay in the
Huh.
country back in 2019. And it was determined that he should not be deported back to El Salvador because he was under threat of, I believe, gang, violence. And so it was determined then that he should not be deported back to El Salvador. Now, at that time, they could have deported him anywhere else. They didn't. They allowed him to return back to his family. He's been living with his family, and
Mm.
now he sort of was pulled up off the streets in Baltimore. So this happened in Baltimore, not in Prince George's County, when he was detained by ICE
Mm.
and then deported. But so to me, it just made sense that he would have just been given another hearing before ICE, and then whatever happened would have happened. People might have been upset, but they wouldn't be upset because he didn't get due process.
Right. And I thank you for explaining that and walking us through the weeds, because one of the challenges that I've been facing is that all I can see when I think about the way ICE has been moving is fugitive slave law era tactics.
Mm,
Because during the fugitive slave era, this was, or in the era where that legislation was in place, you basically had a situation where any black person could be snatched up off the street and sold into enslavement on the allegation that they had been formerly enslaved and they had run away. Now, the reason this reminds me of the same thing is because during that era, black people were not allowed to testify in court against white people. So there was no due process. They could not answer the allegations against them. And it feels like we are returning to that sort of era. And one of the things that we've had a caller on this show, State's Attorney Braveboy, who had once said something along the lines of recently, they identified as a black person, and they basically said, I don't really care what's happening to these immigrants, and it's sort of, very anti-immigrant language and perspective. For me, my thing is, whether you care about them as a human, whether you care about the humanity of this system, just know that what is being done as against the least empowered people in this society is often practice for what they will do to next less empowered people in this society. When you think about the way that due process was denied from people of people who were caught up in the fugitive slave era, I've even had struggle with the idea of calling something like what happened to him a deportation, although technically if he's from El Salvador, he was sent back to his country. But we're seeing people from Vietnam being sent to South Sudan. We're seeing people from Latin American countries being sent to Rwanda, all countries they have absolutely no connection with, and without due process, the right to respond to the allegations and to defend and mount a defense. It feels to me like this could easily be practiced for the same sort of practices and policies being tried as against American citizens. And in fact, we have already seen American citizens get deported. Can you walk me back from this ledge? Is there something that I'm not seeing here that please give me some ability to sleep better at night? Because I'm seeing a lot of danger up ahead if this does not get rectified, particularly since the Supreme Court ordered the administration to facilitate his return.
I think and I'm a biblical person, right? So I go back to Matthew and say,
Mm,
do unto others as you would have others do unto you. And
right,
so at the end of the day, again, if I did something wrong, give me my day in court.
right.
And then if you prove that I've done something wrong, then I'll suffer the consequences. That is the foundation of the American justice system.
Hmm.
So this isn't about protecting, Mr. Garcia. It's about protecting our system of justice, the fundamental principles of our justice system. This is what people fight for. This is what our country, the members of our armed forces, who we just celebrated and saluted yesterday, this is what they died for.
Hmm.
Protecting this idea of America, this idea that we have a country that where people can be treated equally and fairly, and that there is due process. Those are the ideals that this country was built on. And while those ideals didn't necessarily at the time that this Constitution was formed apply to everyone, of course, it wasn't applied to everyone at that time. Through constitutional amendments, changes in laws and attitudes, it has, and we have become a better country as a result of it. And so, why take a step back? Because we have a president who wants to be a dictator. And I think everyone should absolutely be fighting for America, not for the rights of one individual who, oh, by the way, and I'm going to keep reminding everyone of this, was the ultimate beneficiary of due process.
That's right.
So,
That's right. Now, the Supreme Court has weighed in and they said that this administration must facilitate his return. We have now reached a point where I think that decision was maybe a month ago now. And it seems as
longer,
though, yeah,
longer.
it feels like absolutely nothing has been done to advance that directive. Are you seeing anything different? And if not, what are we to make of the power of the Supreme Court in an era where the president has said, basically, who gonna check me, boo?
And well, that's what we're seeing. We're seeing a president and a Justice Department that will defy our justice system. So you're absolutely right. They're asking who is going to check me, and so courts have checked or attempted to check Mr. Trump and his administration on a number of issues, and they have, in some cases, successfully, at least temporarily. Let's say with the Department of Education and other issues, they have been able to kind of halt some of the moves that he's trying to make. But if you can defy the Supreme Court, then what chance do other courts have to hold you accountable? And I think that that's one of the reasons why his administration has decided to take the stance and dig in their heels, because if they can show uh, the world that they don't have to listen to the Supreme Court, then all these other court rulings, well, they are of no moment. So
Right.
I think we are at a real inflection point here in our country when we really think about how we move forward, and is the future of America going to look like, or still espouse the values that we have held dear and true for so many years. Who are we as America? This is the question that, we know who he is, as Hillary Clinton once said. We know
Right.
who he is. The question is, who are we? And so it is important that we have people, even if it's just to demonstrate at this point,
Mm.
that resistance. We have to resist this administration and what they're trying to do.
What does resistance look like? In addition to the protests, and we on this show, we encourage our audience to call their elected officials every day. I feel like we have another thing to call elected officials about. In fact, there's a couple million people right now who are part of the Urban View family who have every single one of their elected officials' contact information in their phone, their social media apps, and all of it. And so we're doing that work. What else can be done? How else should resistance show up in a way? Because again, if we're talking about defending the rule of law,
Mm.
particularly in a country where we had hundreds of years of democracy without equity and equitable access to freedom for Black people and for people of color in
Right.
this country. It feels like if the people don't begin to effectively mount a real resistance, that we
Yeah.
risk going back to some things that, quite frankly, none of us, neither you
None
nor
of
I,
us.
I'm sure there's some trolls out there, but none of us who are rational
Yeah.
people want to go back to. What does it
Um,
look like for you in this moment?
well, I think right now, next year we have a significant election. So I think right now what we need to do is organize and to get out the vote. We need to take back at minimum the House.
Mm,
I think that will show that there is still power uh, of the people, that the people still have the final say. And we have to organize in our communities. We have to talk about these issues. And, not just in terms of race, but also in terms of economics,
mm,
because a lot of what's happening now is to benefit the wealthiest among us,
that's right.
right?
That's right.
And I I couldn't believe what I was listening to a couple of days ago. I was listening to the White House, I guess, meeting between the president of South Africa
Woo.
and Donald Trump. I, I was like, am I in the twilight zone right now? It was unbelievable.
Mm,
And, when you are in the seat of a president, there's certain responsibilities you have for decorum,
yeah.
and just decency and respect for other. elected leaders. So to come to the president, or to bring the president of South Africa into the Oval Office
Mm.
and to chastise and berate him over things that were not even factual,
Right.
but that you would just wanted to grandstand. You do that on your own time. Don't waste this man's time
Mm.
for you to grandstand. You have plenty of opportunity, Mr. President, to grandstand anytime you want to, but that was not the opportunity, and it was lies, and it was lies because this president wanted to say to this black leader of South Africa that
Mm.
you don't protect white people. That's essentially what he wanted to say,
Yeah.
so that he could use that as a dog whistle, right here in America. And I thought that was unbelievably cruel, selfish, and just flat out just disgusting what he did. And it was the white Africans, Afrikaners, I guess they call them,
Mhm.
who were like, no, that's not actually what's happening. But he got his point across to whoever he wanted it to get
Right.
across to.
Exactly.
It is scary because he's essentially trying to set up a scenario where it's okay to have certain people come and immigrate to this country
Yep.
while others cannot.
Yeah.
I think what he was using that opportunity to do was set up a plan to bring more people here who he is comfortable with
Yep.
than the people who are coming here.
That's
And
right.
and I hope people understood it wasn't about him fighting for these South Africans. It was about him fighting to bring people here who he wants to come to America.
Mm.
And and it was I've never seen anything like this. We have to run fast. Like, we have got to get our act together. We have got to take back the House, and then we really have to take back the White House in 2028. I mean, it is critically important